What hurts my feelings when I'm out in Dubai is that people say, oh, you're just the academic school. What you need to know about us is that we are focused on human development and growth, and it's an incredibly kind place to be. I came in, I said, that's done. You can't have a merit-based admission system and have a debenture system. That doesn't make sense to me. So I removed the debenture system from Dubai College. I felt it was unfair. They have to get in on merit.
Now, I'm not a big fan of tertiary education. I certainly didn't go to university myself, and I don't always understand why so many subjects are being taught that don't apply to today. My guest on the show today is going to be challenged by questions relating to this particular point and many more. And I want to know if schools in the UAE are good, average, or they're really just the same as some really rubbish ones back home. And are schools all about making money? It feels like it a lot of the time. But today, hopefully, we'll find out something different. The headmaster of one of the most successful schools in this country, Dubai College, please welcome Tomas Duckling. So, second and fourth, compared to all of the independent schools in the UK.
Co-ed independent schools using the Times list. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I traveled the world for about a year and a half. I couldn't get a job after I got back. I had no clue what I was going to do in my career until much, much later. And I do worry about the pressure we heap on young people today. Should we just say this is childhood and they should be left alone?
And I sat there going, hold on a minute, this is a scam. I'm paying whatever it is I'm paying, and you don't go every day.
I did a history and politics degree with no attendance taken.
That's bonkers. Talk to me about bullying. How do we stop it? Hi everyone, and welcome to this episode of the show. Now, those of you that are watching this show right now may not have subscribed to the YouTube channel. If I could ask you a favor to please subscribe, I'd really appreciate it. The more subscribers I get, the better it is for the content that we produce and the more value I can bring to you. So if you could, I'd really appreciate it. And to those of you listening, whether that be Spotify, Apple, whatever it may be, please leave us a like, give us a follow, and also leave your comments. If I'm doing a good job, let me know. If I'm doing a bad job, also let me know. All feedback is positive to me. Well, Thomas, thank you so much for coming to join us on the show today.
Thank you very much.
We're going to talk about education and all the kind of like the good things, the bad things, the old wives' tales, the problems that exist here in the UAE. And having you here, I hope you're going to answer every question as open and honestly as you can so that everybody can get a real decent understanding about the education system here, but also what to look for, what not to look for, and also, to be honest with you, how you choose where you send your kids, because I think that's an interesting subject as well. Now, DC, we know it as here in Dubai, but for people around the world, Dubai College is clearly one of the best schools here in the UAE. How did that happen?
How did it happen as a school? Well, firstly, it's got a beautiful story. I don't know if you know the story of where DC started, but there wasn't a secondary school in Dubai. So much of the oil and the network around here was based in Sharjah or in Abu Dhabi. And Dubai, when it was first kind of coming to, didn't have a secondary school. DES is the oldest primary school, and it didn't have a secondary school. And our founder was a man called Tim Charlton. And this is a good bit of the story. He was working in Shwayfat school in Sharjah. He decided there needs to be a secondary school in Dubai. He filled up a Land Rover, a white Land Rover in London with school supplies and drove overland to Dubai in late 1970s. And when he got here and he and his wife brought all the supplies, they had to convince people there needs to be a secondary school. And he was relentless. And they set up in a villa in the first instance. And then he eventually managed to convince, keep going. And Sheikh Rashid gave plot B141 on Palace Row, and that is Crown Decreed land, and that's where the secondary school comes from. We've still got our constitution document. It's an amazing piece of paper, incredibly historic relative to the age of Dubai. But also interesting about that, of course, is we have an unusual situation, which maybe we'll get into, which is that we are the only school in Dubai that starts from year 7 as well. Most schools in Dubai are what's called K through 12, so they go all the way through. We start from year 7. And how did it become one of the best schools in the world in terms of results is that access point and the demand that we have for places and how few places we have means that we can offer an opportunity of true excellence to some pretty special kids.
And how many kids are at the school?
So there's 1,138 at present, and we have year groups of about 176. And we keep our class sizes very, very small relative to other schools. So 22 in a base level class, 8 formentary, but really in A level we've got about 13 in a class. If that would be about as big as we go, very different to many other school models where they'll just keep filling up. So our because we're a not-for-profit school, we really only care about one thing, which is the quality of the education and the child's well-being. Everything else comes after that.
Now, you're a young 39-year-old headmaster of a prestigious school here in the UAE. How on earth did that happen?
Yeah,
Because
no.
when you came to my place today and you knocked on the door, you're what, 6'3", 6'4",
6'4", yeah.
6'4", you big tall chap as you walked in with a big smile and whatnot. You didn't look very headmaster-like to me.
I get that a lot. Yeah, I get that a lot. Yeah, it's been an incredible journey for me personally, and as discussed previously, a lot of luck involved. To give you the short, brief history, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I traveled the world for about a year and a half, just because I love traveling. I love different cultures. I love seeing the world. I left Rio Carnival, and I came back in the middle of the crash, actually. And I wrote down on the flight over, I wrote down what did I want to do in my life. I wrote down two things: possibly go into education or journalism. I got out and I remember, this is like something from a film, the little signs that you get of the Evening Standard, and it said 400,000 jobs slashed in media. So I kind of crossed out journalism. And then I got back and a friend of mine who was working in teacher recruitment. I couldn't get a job after I got back. And he said, look, I've got an opportunity for you in an all-girls school. It's predominantly it's people that have come to the country, immigrants and refugees, high proportion of need and deprivation in North London, and they desperately need someone to be a cover supervisor. They need someone to go in there and essentially just look after the lessons. And I turned up, and then they said, hello, who are you? Much like they felt when I said, I'm Tom, I'm the cover supervisor. They said, you're not like Beryl, our last cover supervisor. I said, well, no. And they said, give us your CV. And they looked at my CV and saw my grades and saw my degree and that sort of stuff. And they said, do you fancy teaching? And I said, I don't know why I'd teach. And then they said, well, the history teacher actually isn't here and you got a degree in history and politics. Do you mind teaching a bit of the history? I mean, you could just sit there if you want, or you can try and teach it. I said, well, I'll try and teach it. Fine. And they said, how's your maths? And I said, my maths is all right, thank you. And they said, all right, we've got a GCSE bottom set maths class. How do you fancy that? And that was basically my first ever experience since I've been in a classroom myself, was going into a classroom. And I absolutely loved it. I was terrible. I mean, I'm so bad. But I loved it. It was just a great experience. Being with young people is a privilege. Obviously I haven't done other jobs apart from being a cocktail bartender, but I don't want to be behind an office, and just working with young people was a privilege. So then I obviously trained to be a teacher. Again, I moved to a different school in London there, similar sort of thing. I went in, and week one I was supposed to be doing my training, and you were supposed to do a certain amount of hours, and they said, yeah, we've just seen you can do a few things. Do you mind teaching A-level? And you're not really supposed to teach A-level at the start. And I said, sure, yeah, I'd love to. And then first week, they gave me an A-level year 12 on Nazi Germany, an A-level year 13 on Russian history, a sociology A-level, and a politics A-level, political philosophy. So I was teaching 4 A-levels in my first year of my training year. And then I met my wife, and we started on our international journey. And then we didn't know where we were going. We went to a place we got offered a job. I got offered jobs. We decided we wanted to go after we got married. I got offered a job in Tanzania, in Qatar, and one in a place called Brunei. I genuinely didn't know where Brunei was, so we had to Google it. We thought it actually was out here, and then we sort of saw pictures of kind of orangutans and proboscis monkeys and snakes and the jungle, and we just got married, and we thought, let's go for 2 years. And then I went to Brunei, ended up in a school called Jeradong International School, which happens to be one of the best schools in Asia. No research was done on the school or the quality of schools. I knew nothing about not-for-profit schools, profit schools, groups. I knew absolutely nothing about the whole thing. And I just completely fell in love with international education, working with young people who really want to learn, who do extra homework, who are so eager. Equally, the nature of having a classroom of 15 kids who all come from different places. So 4 years there. And 8 years in Switzerland. So stumbled into one of the world's most prestigious schools, a school called Aiglon College, by sheer luck. And then here you go, I've ended up at Dubai College. not long
Well, you
after.
say something quite interesting there when you say teaching kids from all different nationalities. If you think about all of your international experience, it's been doing that. Talk to me about how things compare. I've been here in Dubai for 21 years, but I've lived in 10 countries,
Mm.
but I wasn't at school in those 10 countries.
Mm.
And so I'm sure the experience is very different. And over in Switzerland, one of the most expensive school in the world.
Yeah. Third most expensive school in the world, but all three most expensive schools are in Switzerland. So yes,
And the fees are how much per year?
$180,000 per year.
$180,000 a year.
And if I've got that wrong, I apologise. I've left obviously now, so it was there or thereabouts.
So can we just say to a few of the Dubai parents, you're not paying the most.
Yeah.
There's actually value here.
Anything between 160 and 180. I'm not quite sure what the current fee is, but a large fee.
Bonkers.
Yeah, it's a lot of money, but also an incredible school and quite good value for money when you put in all the bits that they do. In terms of there's loads of trips, there's loads of outdoor education, there's incredible opportunities there.
Would they get given cars and houses and trust funds and stuff
No, but
by the school?
Yeah, but it delivers. Switzerland's an expensive place, but yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about the comparisons. You're here now.
Yeah.
Okay, in a place that essentially most people are foreign, most people are new, and most people have come here to try and become something more.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, most people. And so what I've learned from that is that because everybody's hungry, everybody also understands what it's like to be new.
Mm.
And so people help others settle in. And so it has a great vibe and energy to the city itself.
Mm.
How does education here let's just start with education compared directly to the UK and to Switzerland?
So I've been out of the UK for a long time. I think I agree with everything you said about Dubai. Dubai is the center of the world's optimism, it feels like at the moment. It's just a joyous place where everyone is pushing, and that pushing can cause tension and conflict, but it actually also has this incredible ambition to it. And I think that's felt in the classrooms, particularly in the classrooms I've experienced in DC. The culture of education, the importance of education, how much of a priority parents make on schools and their education shows you that from wherever they come from, education is seen as one of the key things for young people to do here, alongside the other benefits and activities, whether that be sports or music, etc. How does it compare to the UK? Look, is with sadness, education is being reduced in the UK. I mean, in terms of the amount of money they're spending on it. The arts has taken a big hit over recent years. I'm a believer in holistic education and character education, right? So I fundamentally believe that learning is not just what happens in the classroom. It is the whole thing. It is the experience of young people being in a school around other young people, learning to interact. It's having people who are invested in your growth, who teach you manners, who teach you to open doors, who are kind to you so you understand that kindness can lead to results. All of these points, I think, are what education is about, including the extracurricular program. I don't know if I feel that certainly in state education in the UK that remains, but again, I've not been there for 14 or 15 years, so maybe I'm not the right person to say. It's certainly, Dubai and the Middle East is one of the most vibrant educational markets in the whole world. I mean, schools are coming here en masse because it's a really exciting place to be.
Now, when we look over the last 10 years, I don't know if that's changed, but often you'll have parents say, yes, my son or my daughter's going to university in the UK or in the United States or Canada. They don't say they're going to university here often. And there's also been criticism of schooling here in the UAE because of the attitudes and behaviour of some of the kids and the parents towards other parents. Is that something that is fair to comment on? Everyone turning up in their G-Wagons and, I've got more money than you type of thing. Is that fair or not?
Again, it's difficult to see things through the lens of Dubai College, right? So for two reasons. Dubai College is the most oversubscribed school probably in the UAE, certainly in Dubai. We have over 800 applications for the 170 places we have, right? So for that reason, people are very keen to get into Dubai College, and then when they get in, there is a sunk cost fallacy or whatever. They're not going to talk themselves out of the school. People are very positive about the school. So most of my parent interactions are pretty positive. Obviously, I speak to a lot of heads, and I hear the horror stories elsewhere. I think there's two sides to that question, isn't there? So I think universities, there isn't a higher education system here yet, and I know that's something that I think people want to grow into the education system. I think behaviours and intercultural behaviours are a really important thing that I know a lot of the top schools will focus on. I happen to have, strangely, even though I've only been here a year, I've visited about 30 separate schools, and there's a reason for that. I think it's really important to meet other schools, understand people in the area. Heads in Dubai have been incredibly kind to me. And I have to say, going around the schools, I've not seen very negative things. I've seen a lot of positive things. Behavior is pretty good, a really, really impressive approach. So I wouldn't know. I personally haven't dealt with a lot of G wagons in the car park. I hear the horror stories elsewhere, but no, it's pretty positive. Again, from a Dubai College perspective, our kids are quite astonishingly polite.
You say that the university system isn't developed here, but there are universities here.
Mm.
You know, Heriot Watt's here, Wollongong's here. That's just down the road from you. The Canadian university, and so
Birmingham.
on and so forth. You know, there's Middlesex and everything else that's here. So there is tertiary education here. Is that not up to the standard?
I think parents, and certainly the parents who send themselves to Dubai College, would perceive it as not being as prestigious and up to the standard. You know, look, I say this to parents a lot. How do you mentioned at the start, how do you judge a school, right? It's a really important thing. So a lot of people look at results. Now, arguably, and this is going to be a stupid thing to say for the person who's got some of the highest results in the world, results are the least important thing a school does, okay? Because results are an objective, pure number, but they are representative of a student's ability. So people in education talk about something called value added, right? Value added takes your baseline score and your end score and sees how much the school added to your journey, right? So I much prefer to discuss value added, as in, are my teachers, is my school adding value to a young person's journey? Okay. But actually, the thing that, as a parent myself, what do I care about? Well, I care about my kids' happiness, fundamentally. I want them to go to school, and I therefore want the culture of the school to be invested in, for me, character education and growth. I want to know that the people teaching my child really cares about how they are growing as a person. They're not just drilling them with chemistry. They're drilling them with chemistry and instilling values about how they should be as young people that go and do good in the world. However, what really matters to parents is universities. Right? Universities is pretty much the thing most parents want to talk to me about. Why is that? Because if you look at metrics around the world, the university you go to has the biggest impact on your earnings afterwards, on average. Now, there's always the Zuckerbergs of this world, or yourself, who go different journeys, right? And they are able to achieve incredible success. But on the whole, people from top universities often get top jobs, which get top pay. Right? That's a pretty standard route. And the anxiety of parents who are worried about, in this very uncertain, ever-changing world, they're worried about their child's future, is one of the safest bets they get. Now, I wouldn't want to say anything disparaging about Dubai universities, but especially considering we have such academic children, they are still going to. Last year, Dubai College, 60% of our kids went to the top 1% of the universities in the world by the QES rankings, right? In fact, yesterday, we got 11 kids into Cambridge, and we got 5 kids to Oxford as well, right? So, which is enormous. That's around 10% of a cohort all got into Oxford and Cambridge yesterday. So, yeah, it's super, super significant. My understanding, and again, you'll speak to people much more knowledgeable on Dubai than me, is that the E33 and the D33 agenda moving forward is they want to develop a clear educational and intellectual route for Dubai to kind of diversify the economy, and that will involve encouraging top universities to come here. The most obvious example for this is NYU Abu Dhabi. So I wouldn't want to say anything disparaging about some of the universities you mentioned, but NYU Abu Dhabi, which has a huge scholarship proportion, is increasingly being regarded for the research they're doing and the quality of the education they're providing.
So I learned something, and so I'm going to put some cards on the table here, and you can guide me. So my 26-year-old, when she went to university, she did a year in Cambridge, and then she went to London into UAL, and she studied design of some sort. I can't even remember now. And 3 years in UAL was a course that could have been done in 15 months. When my daughter was going to university, I promise you, I thought she was going 9 to 5, and I found out she had like 3 or 4 lectures a week. And I sat there going, hold on a minute, this is a scam. I'm paying whatever it is I'm paying, £25,000 a year, including her accommodation and her fees and whatnot. No, more than that. And I'm like, and you don't go every day. Why do universities do that, do you think?
So I think there's 2 things to discuss here. The first is what you can realistically change and what is fair. And then the second is kind of what is important to me in answer to that question. So why do universities? Are universities a racket? Is a big, deep question. the societal and cultural conditions that have got us to this stage have prioritized education, and they have structured education in the route that we think about it having. You could, for the same token, why do you go at 17 or 18? Why does education end where it does? Why don't you go to university earlier or later when you're ready? All of these things are a social construction that has led to what we all, or many people, follow, right? I mean, I did a history and politics degree, actually, with no attendance taken. So I had 4 or 5 hours a week, and I didn't even have to go if I didn't want to, particularly, right? So
What, you mean show up to the lectures?
I didn't have to go, no.
How would you do it?
Well, you just, once you get sent the questions, and theoretically, as long as you're able to do the work yourself and understand the history and the politics, you could do it.
You still had to pay?
Yeah, you still had to pay. So that's
bonkers.
It is bonkers, but that's a concern. And again, here's the important part to come back to, right? So about what actually matters, right? So if you just see education as a means to an end, then that is what it is, and it is bonkers. The whole system is bonkers, right? Because equally, like the old cliches of why do kids learn what they learn in school, right? Do you really need Pythagoras? How many times a day do you use Pythagoras? Now,
A day? Ever?
exactly, right? Or ever, right? So is the information what you need for life, or is it education, so in this kind of Renaissance ideal for the good of doing it, right? Also, we still don't know enough about neuroscience to understand the cognitive development, right? So Pythagoras may do something to your brain that makes you understand things in a different way, right? So, but what we do agree upon is we must agree upon a curriculum. And this is why I'm passionate about what I do, particularly in relation of character education, right? So I don't think I go to school each day to make sure kids learn Pythagoras. I understand Pythagoras is very important and is a key skill to know in maths. So I'm not against Pythagoras, but I genuinely think that by creating cultures in schools where you are encouraging people to see their role in giving back and making the world a better place, you're able to harness these kids that go on to do that as well. And so why do universities do what they do? I think the same thing is true, certainly in some courses, and maybe more than others, is that they are a launch pad for people to go and do that. If you were designing education from scratch tomorrow, would you do it in quite the same way? Who knows? Maybe you wouldn't, but that's the system that we're in. Equally, one of the things I really deal with parents is explaining to them how great other universities are out there as well, right? So we also have a narrow conception. I have parents that will refuse to let their children apply, and this has been all 3 international schools, world-leading international schools I've worked in, that refuse for their child to apply to a school that isn't an Ivy League, right? An Ivy League is just 8 schools that happen to be set up at a certain time and put themselves under a bracket. It's not necessarily a mark of quality, but it's seen as a mark of quality, you see? So, and for that reason, it's incredibly competitive to get there. But lots of students now and parents are making decisions to go to different universities around the world. That's the biggest growth market. It used to be just US and UK, and now, whether it be in Europe, whether it be in Singapore, and I think increasingly in the Middle East, it's a massive growing market for people. Whether it's good or not is a different question.
Okay, well let's discuss that, because I try as an employer of people, okay, in 2 professional industries, one in wealth management, which is financial services essentially, another one in insurance, both corporate and in retail. We employ people. And if you said to me, here's a guy that's just done a degree in economics or international business, and he got a 2-1, okay, or here's a guy that's just done 3 years apprenticeship in your competitor's office, I know I'm taking.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously,
but it's kind of like elevated that you've been to university for some ego-driven parent. Because I'm going to say something I really shouldn't say here. Okay, and I'm going to say it, and I want to be really honest about it. My kids went to an expensive school because of my ego. They didn't go to an expensive school because it was the right school for them to go to. I pulled up at that place in Felsted. It looked like Hogwarts. It was fancy and swanky. They showed us around. Oliver Cromwell went there and all this kind of wonderful history stuff that was loaded onto me. And I walked out of there going, that's a nuts.
Yeah.
Okay. Put my kids into this epic school. One of them flourished. One of them was bullied chronically. But I was like, no, because I was bullied, we'll see it through rather than walk away, could just change the bullies type of thing. But that was all my ego, so that I could have dinner or I could have lunch, and people would say, where would your kids go to school? Oh, they're at Felsted. When my first daughter went off to University of Arts in London, like that, for her subjects and what she was studying, she's at UAL. And, some people would say Imperial, some people would say LSE or whatever it may be. But I was like proud that she was in, the right place. But arguably it's nonsense. Because if I go back to my state schooling, I excelled when I had a great teacher.
Yeah.
Okay. I remember Mrs. Morgan teaching me chemistry up until the 3rd year. She was brilliant. And I chose chemistry. And I got Dr. Arnott, who was half asleep most of the time and not that interested. And all of my interest in chemistry disappeared. So I look at the teachers more than I look at anything else. And how I got enthusiastic about a subject was because my geography teacher used to, because my dad was overseas a lot, my geography teacher would always sit down and remind me to remember where my dad was on the map, okay, and what was going on in those countries geographically so that I could learn, you know, and we were into orienteering, and so all that kind of stuff on maps was in. So I got into it because of that. And I look at it now and I'm like, first of all, the whole world has shifted and moved. Okay, parents go, I can't believe my kids are on the phone all the time. Yet when they were 2 years old, they gave them an iPad at dinner to be quiet. And I'm like, well, what are you... Why did you give them the iPad? Well, I didn't want to... You started the problem. But the kids have grown up in a different world. We have AI there. We have an education system that you say hasn't changed. There are some things that have changed, but it doesn't make any sense to keep it the same. But then you've got, you know, if I speak to my Indian friends or my Pakistani or my Chinese or my Iranian friends, it's like, that's the most important thing that they go to this particular school, and you know, my kids are at Dubai College and it's the best thing ever. Yeah, and I'm like, what world are you living in?
So, I mean, there's about 1,000 things to pick up on there.
Sorry for my rant. Okay.
So,
but I knew this would come out.
right,
Because...
no, it's good. Right, but it's good. So, like, firstly, you can't... So, I went to a state school myself, all right? And then I ended up running I ran the educational side. So, there was a CEO and there was me ran the educational side of one of the world's most prestigious schools, right? That journey is absurd if you think about it. I went to a state school in Watford with 2,000 kids. And, you know, again... I came from a lovely middle class household, but most of my mates didn't go to university, right? That wasn't, for most of them, that was never even a consideration or a route, right? My dad was from East London, Walthamstow, and he pushed himself to be the first person from his family to go to university. So therefore, his kids were going to go to university. So I never had I wasn't going to go to university thing, but many of my friends didn't go to university.
It's normal not to, more than it was abnormal to go.
And so that journey on a personal level is quite astonishing. But one of the things it's taught me is of all the things you can't do is you can't judge a parent for wanting to do the best for their child, right? Because yes, is the system fair or logical? Probably not, right? Did you make a decision about your child's education for your own ego? Well, on one hand, you did, right? So that's quite a self kind of deferential thing to make. Say your ego was the thing that drove that decision. Or was it because you said, actually, I want to put my kids somewhere where I think I'm giving them the best? Because I don't know about this area, right? And you do the same all the time. If you see restaurants that look a bit clean and those that look a bit dirty, you go for the clean one, which probably costs a bit more money. If you go doctors, if you go to the doctor yourself, maybe you go somewhere, but if your kid's injured, well, I want the best for my kid. Don't operate on them until I know that you're the right person, right? You want the best dentist. So I think you can't judge parents for making the simple decision, which is they want to put the best situation in and around their child. And that's why they make that decision. Beyond that, though, in terms of kind of the whole system and the whole obsession by it, that the competitive nature of it, I think is quite a challenging thing, and is a real thing in Dubai as well, right? There's no doubt about that. There is a culture here where everyone asks you the same 3 questions: what do you do for a living? Where are you from? Where do your kids go to school? And that is a different thing from my other experience, having worked in Asian international market, having worked in the Swiss international market. It is such a febrile atmosphere here. And again, the fact I'm on your podcast, right? That's an interesting thing to do, to invite an educator on to this particular podcast. I had an event on Sunday organised by a large group where they wanted to invite headmasters onto the stage. So it's a particular thing in Dubai where education is everything. Is that good? Is that good for children? Super, super challenging to make those decisions, because it really is good for some. One of the hardest things I have to deal with at Dubai College is are the decisions we make and the structures we put in place for these children helping them or hindering them? I'll give you an example, right? Our kids come in at about 6:30 in the morning if they're playing sports, right? So they come in for strength and conditioning. We've got 74% of our kids represent the school in A sports. We've got some of the highest sports level in the region. obviously rugby and netball are a big deal there, but we've got players that go on and play professional rugby. We've got a guy in the Six Nations playing for Italy who came to our school, right? So that is a real thing about the quality of sport level. They come in at 6:30, they're doing a really fast-paced school up until 3:30, then they're actually playing their games and they're doing their training until 5 o'clock, then they're caught in traffic on the way home. Some of them are then going to their rugby club or a different sport, then they're doing their homework, then they're getting through, then they're getting 5 hours sleep. Is that right for children? On one hand, it shapes and creates fantastic young people who are able to multitask, who are able to be adaptable and able to be organized. On the other side, where's the childhood of that person, right? One of my things I often challenge parents on is, are you shrinking your childhood, right? Of your child's childhood, sorry. Because they say this to me, and it always worries me this. They say, we don't think you're doing enough careers education in year 8. Year 8, for those that don't know, is kind of 13 years old. And I'll often say, why do you think they need careers education in year 8? Now, it's the same anxiety, right? What are they going to do? They should be a lawyer, they should be a doctor, right? But actually, should they, or should we just say this is childhood and they should be left alone? And both arguments are valid. If you give them more information and help them understand where they're going to go, that could be good for them. Or should we just leave them alone? I had no clue what I was going to do with my career until much, much later. And I'm grateful for that. And I do worry about the pressure we heap on young people today.
Well, here's the dichotomy. I don't often meet a parent that doesn't say something similar to what you just said about your own career.
Mm-hmm.
Most parents don't
Yeah.
know, even my, the ones that would traditionally kind of like doctor, lawyer, surgeon type thing, be the career choices mum and dad would insist upon being. They were like, yeah, I didn't want to do that. And so I ended up doing something else. Most people didn't know, yet they want to force their kids down the same path the way that they were parented.
But you're totally right with the word dichotomy as well, right? So I will have parent conversations with people, logical, brilliant people, experts in their field, and they will say the following 2 sentences. 1, AI is changing the world to such an extent, I don't know what careers are ahead for my child. It's possible that there'll be jobs that we don't even know about. They'll say that first sentence, and then the second sentence would be, and for that reason, I want them to be an engineer. I'm being deadly serious.
Yeah, no, I can imagine.
And it completely deadpan because they need safety for their child. Right? Their child is the most important thing in their life. And actually, you got to worry about a parent where that isn't the truth, right? So in this scary world, it is you've got to be really kind of liberal and free and safe in your own mind to say, I don't care. The job probably doesn't exist yet. Go freeform, right? But what actually parents do is they lean into, I think we need engineers right now. Do your maths, do your physics, be an engineer, safe. And they'll have that dichotomy in their own mind.
Interesting.
Yeah, fascinating.
Do you feel that have you got this experience in over in Brunei and in Switzerland and here? Do you feel it's the same the world over? The behaviour of the parents towards that, is that the same challenge everyone's facing?
Again, you'll speak to so many people that know more about Dubai. Dubai is such a fascinating culture and ecosystem. This place for all people coming from around the world, which creates this incredible friendliness, this incredible openness, this kind of networking culture you get here, and education is a massive part of that. I worked in a boarding school previously. Boarding schools are different things, and the same reason, right? So, again, take into your concept of ego versus kindness of your decision you made for your child, right? Because boarding is an interesting one. On one hand, sending your child to a top boarding school, great for the ego, great for the reputation, but then the kindness thing is the child is away from you, right? And some people, I don't want to pass comment on this because so many people that I really respect make this decision, and I worked with and I took their children. I would struggle to let my child go to a boarding school. However, at the same time, they genuinely deep down think that the best thing for their child is to put them in that boarding school environment to prepare them for the world. And I must say, having stayed in touch with many of those young people, they were incredibly prepared for the world. I was so unprepared when I went to university. When I left Watford and went to university, it was just completely, I've never lived away from home. It was completely overwhelming.
You're in one of the craziest party towns in the world,
Nottingham,
weren't you?
I went to Nottingham.
Yeah.
It was amazing, but it was totally overwhelming, And again, Nottingham was at that time a place where people like me who didn't get into Oxford went, right? So, but people I'd met one private school kid before I went to Nottingham, and people kept coming up to me saying, "Where did you school?" And I couldn't believe there was a network of schools. I didn't know about it, right? So again, why you make decisions for your children can be seen from both sides, I think. So boarding is very, very different. Parental relationships, parental decisions, and when stuff goes wrong, how parents deal with that and react and fly in is different to when they can knock on the door every day. It's just a different experience.
When I was growing up, the information you would get was some books. Okay, if you wanted to learn something, you'd go to the library, and every town I was around had a nice library. It may not have been fancy, but there were lots of books in there for me to learn. So if I wanted to go and study something or learn about something or get the answer to something, I'd had a bet with my dad that something was true, and he bet me 10 quid, and I'm like, I'll show you. That's where I'd find that information out. Nowadays, that information is all at everybody's fingertips. They don't even have to type anything anymore. They can just speak to the anonymous chat GPT and so on to get answers to questions. When we look at what kids are being taught, do they still need to learn those things? Are they relevant to a 12-year-old, a 13-year-old today as they were relevant to me as a 12-year-old in 1982? Because if I wanted to know, I had to go source it. Otherwise, I didn't know unless they taught me at school. Whereas now that's so much different.
Okay, right. So yes, it is. But then this is one of the things that I say a very controversial yet traditional thing to people like this. I think it's very easy and I go to a lot of conferences for education, as you imagine.
That must be fun.
Yeah, you can imagine. But the coolest thing you can say on a stage at education is you can stand up there and say, education is broken, everybody. Tests won't exist anymore. AI is going to destroy education. Okay, so that's a very easy, great thing to say. And people will applaud you for that. It's much braver to say, I actually think there's a lot of positives to education. Not perfect. Not all the knowledge and information you get is always going to be useful. But that doesn't mean it's bad knowledge, right? And equally, in a world where you can't necessarily understand if someone is responsible for their knowledge, tests aren't necessarily a bad thing, right? They're a good way to distinguish between those who have learnt and haven't learnt. One of our big focuses is on oracy, the spoken word. Why are we so interested in that? Well, because moving forward, the written word is more replicable by AI. Therefore, the spoken word is not replicable. So the ability for a student to stand up and explain their answer is a really, really important and powerful skill. I challenge people on this, and it's one of the interesting things I find about people in education in the world is they seem to forget that the present was created by the past. So they think you should rip up the educational system and say, let's rip it all up. We don't need this stuff anymore. Why do you need the Tudors? Why do you need Pythagoras? Let's just focus on robots. Let's do all that, right? And then I kind of say, well, look around you. Look at Dubai. Look at these buildings around you. The education system that everyone seems to think is broken has led to the most astonishing human progress, the most incredible level of technical, mathematical innovation you could ever possibly imagine exists right now because of the education system. And I quite struggle when people think, so it's not always about relevance or use or utility for me. It's actually about the fact that there is some good in there. Does that mean it needs to stay the same? No. Of course not. It needs to be changed, but I think it needs to be changed, iteratively over time, gently, with an appreciation of what bits of education are really, really important, but changing to the fact that how can we adapt it to the future?
Do you think you're doing a good job of that?
I think we're doing a good job of that in my particular school, but I think actually the industry, I love working in education and I love meeting educators on the whole. It is a very non-competitive industry in lots of respects. Now, it doesn't mean that people aren't in competition. We are, right? We're in competition for results. We're in competition for kids. We're in competition for all sorts of things, sports, whatever. But actually, it is a purpose, right? And that sounds like a wishy-washy thing to say. It is a moral purpose. Anyone who says they work into education and they don't care about making people better is lying. All right, they might think about it in a different way, but they fundamentally come in each day because they want to help young people grow. Now, they might lose track of why they did that in their own personal journeys, but they love what they do. I love what I do, and I think we are doing mostly a good job. I do think. And again, I know I keep coming back to this. One of my passions is the idea of character education, that education shouldn't just be about imparting knowledge. It's not just about that. It's about growing people. And that sounds like a kind of flippant phrase or whatever, but the current educational system, which we've been discussing, which people criticize, is the creation of the Industrial Revolution. All right. So educational systems came in and around the Industrial Revolution in the UK under the British model. And the British model really was the model went around the world due to the size of the British Empire that at one point covered a quarter of the world and more. Right. So the British educational model is the largest and most successful educational model for humanity. Okay. Now, it changes in each form. It doesn't mean it's the only model, but it's pretty much the largest. Why did that come about? Well, if you look at things like the Asquith reforms, when they couldn't understand after the Boer War why people weren't able or ready or fit to be, to be able to do what the government needed them to do, then of course they started to change the health service. They started to change the health of people and invest in dental checks and that sort of stuff. They were the early signs that led to the NHS in the UK. But actually, around that time as well, they were concerned as the industry and capitalism changed what it needed. People didn't have the literacy and numeracy to do the job. That's where education came from, right? And that's when it became a state education. What I do think is true is that we need different things now, all right? When you've got, whether it be AI, whether you've got technical abilities, when we've got different ways to communicate, the purest level of the construction of our current educational system, which is based around essentially simple numeracy and literacy levels, I think we need more now, right? We do need more character and values. We need more adaptability and flexibility and innovation. And we need to weave that into what we have to really help people really be what we need for the future. I do think.
And do you yourself, with your committee, decide upon how and when that's done?
What do you mean?
Well, it was weaving that into what's being taught. How do you go about doing that? Because for me, it's like some of that's chalk and cheese. So to weave together, that would there be an evolution of that over.
So we Dubai College is a British curriculum, or English curriculum more accurately, school. All right, so we have to do the GCSEs and A level, and that's what we do. And they are very knowledge-heavy things, GCSEs and A-level. Obviously, my experience in my previous school was the IB, and IB is a very inquiry-driven course, and it's much more connected and values-driven as well, right? They're very different things, and I can discuss both should you wish. But what is particularly interesting about that is, of course, recently the government in the UK had introduced a new curriculum reform. It was deeply underwhelming, if I'm honest. And it was very good for us because one of the big focuses was on oracy, which we were already doing at Dubai College. But what have we done, to answer your direct question? Okay, so for next year's Year 7, for the first time ever, we're going to have something called the EDGE curriculum at Dubai College. What is that? EDGE stands for empathy, design, growth, and entrepreneurship. So students cross subjects, including work from digital skills, computer science, mathematics, and also and DT, as you would call it, design. They're going to have real world problems to try and solve. All right, so that's where the empathy comes in. What good do you need to do for the planet? Here's a problem. They're going to work together to create real, tangible designs and innovations to solve real world problems. These are 11-year-olds, by the way. And of course, because of the nature of Dubai, because of what we want, they're going to scale that from an entrepreneurship sort of view to be a product that could be sellable, and then they're going to present on that. Okay, so for me, that's the perfect answer to your question in terms of it's a traditional model of education. They're still doing the key contents, but it's wrapped and frameworked around a real world problem, which teaches that idea of, which I come back to, about kids being shown that they need to be better people to help the world. I'm not interested in kids getting just good results and going to good universities. I want to know that the people that go through my school have the values that allow them to make the world a better place, right? I don't have the highest opinion of some of the world's leaders at the moment, so I think many people may do. I want to know, hand on heart, that the moral integrity of our students means that they go to do good. So I think that's a perfect way to build a product and a framework over an education that gives it relevance and collaboration, teamwork, innovation, adaptability, flexibility, entrepreneurship, whatever you want to call it, all weaved into that.
You've got essentially that line of thought and that process, but then you've probably got some parents pushing back in the household with the behaviors that the kids are learning as well, which may not be in line with that, and you face those challenges every day.
But then that's why I do what I do, is I'm passionate about education being the most important transformation for young people, right? I think education, for good and for ill, by the way, right? A bad education, your chemistry teacher can change your direction totally, right? At the state school, my dad's a chemical engineer, right? He loves physics. He loves quantum mechanics. Obviously, he's proud of me, but he's disappointed that I didn't get into science, right? Because I went to a school where the science teaching was abysmal. My teacher was asleep a lot of the time in my physics class. My English teacher was one of the most inspirational people I've ever met in my life. My history teacher and my politics teachers were the most amazing people, and I've stayed in touch with them. And for that reason, what did I do? I did history, politics, and English. I did very well at those things, and my eyes were open. I think that is such an absolute privilege that we get to do that, and nothing for me can change your life direction as much as education, for good and for bad.
Talk to me about bullying. I was bullied at school. I was bullied to the point that the bullying from Paul Fowler and Justin Zimmerman, who I remember to this day, drove a massive part of my success in my career. I wanted to try and prove them wrong. But we never used to have, when I was a kid, bullying leading into suicide. It just wasn't a thing. And when I started to hear about it, maybe it was in the 90s or the early 2000s, it was just, random and one-off, and it must have been extreme, or they must have had a mental health problem. But it became a bigger and bigger thing around the world. Kids being mean to each other is one thing, but how do you, as a human being, process that type of behavior? I know that most schools will say that, or all schools will say they don't tolerate that, yada, yada, yada. But it still exists. So how do you manage it? Because I have this theory in life, and maybe you'll agree with me here. I think there should be 2 laws in the world that everyone has to abide to. Okay, no questions, no days off, nothing. You have to follow these 2 laws. The first law is you must give up half a day per month to work in service of others. Okay, and that could be working at a soup kitchen. Doesn't matter what it is. You could be sweeping the streets. You can be looking after the dogs at a dog shelter. But being service of others for half a day by law every month. That could be a weekday. That could be a weekend. Doesn't matter. And you must, by law, find someone to be kind to every day. One person, and an act of kindness could be buying a security guard a coffee and asking how his family is, cracking a joke and having some fun with the window cleaner. It doesn't matter what it is. Yeah. Stop and be purposefully kind to somebody. And I believe if that happened, I believe there wouldn't be any wars in the world, because people would get over stuff much easier. And I believe that if you work in service of others, you find meaning in life. So with that in mind, when we then look into bullying, how do we stop it?
I mean, firstly, you and I are very philosophically aligned, right? Because I'm massively into service education, and I'm also kindness is pretty much the value I try to model the most. So how do we stop it? Look, we can't. Okay. Now, I guess you got to take a step back. Does bullying exist in schools? It exists in all schools, right? And again, not a comment on my past school, but also boarding schools can be really, really tough places, right? Really, really tough places. Okay. One of my best friends went through the most hideous boarding school bullying, just the worst possible treatment. And I'm sorry for what you had to go through. And that sort of stuff is just abysmal. Why do people bully? Well, they bully essentially from either they've received unkindness themselves, often from the home, or from their own feelings of inadequacy, and they take it out on others, right? They're kind of the 2 most obvious ones. So how do we deal with it, right? So actually, zero tolerance is an interesting phrase that people use lots of times. So if someone bullies another person, there has to be punishments. It has to be taken seriously. The child has to be protected, right? You're totally correct about the rising amount of suicide in young people, which is horrible and horrific. And it comes back to that previous point I was making about the pressure on young people, the lack of childhood as well. You can't fix it because people do nasty things, right? And I guess, and this is where I give my wishy-washy answer, you only can have an absolute, what I do believe is that by setting a tone and a culture in a school, or any institution actually, that will change how people interact within that institution. I believe that. My first assembly at Aiglon College, I stood up there and I said, how am I feeling right now? They just, new head arrives. I want everyone to take a second to think about how I'm feeling right now. They're expecting a headmasterly speech. And I said, and I'm scared. I'm standing here right in front of you now. I'm scared about how this is going to go for me, right? What you've just done is practice empathy. And empathy is the start of engaging with other people, right? And then I talked about how important kindness is for me, because empathy, of course, I think once you understand someone's problem, that leads to a fact whereby you can then be kind towards that person, right? Very few people who feel empathy for others are then unkind, right? So that's how it works. So I passionately believe in that. I'll give you an example, actually. One of the things I loved about my previous school was how culture can self-correct as well, right? So I loved working in the school I worked at, and my wife was one of the house parents, right? So we lived in one of the boarding houses for 3 years. And what was fascinating to me was these are very wealthy kids, right? They're wealthy kids from incredible backgrounds, and it was still a very diverse school. And often new kids would come in, and they'd be a bit, they'd send a bit of a tone, and they think they're a bit cool, and they might have a bit of that bullying sort of vibe. And it wasn't me that had to go tell them. It was the other kids that used to go and say, that's not how we do things around here, right? Did that mean there was no bullying? Of course it didn't. But actually, I would say that that became because my boss, the head of that school, Nicola Sparrow, kindness was her biggest thing. She went about kindness all the time. So it doesn't remove bullying, but it sets a tone within a school that sets a culture, which means the people who feel part of that, who feel belonging as part of that culture, will correct others. So again, that's not a perfect answer, and it doesn't mean you can solve all problems of bullying, because this is going to exist. But I do think you can create cultures which make it less likely to happen.
It makes me feel sick whenever I hear of a kid that's bullied
Mm.
because of the mental torment they go through. And again, mine was face to face. I didn't have a device in my hand where I was being bullied through that as well.
But do you know what would make you more sick is when you work in this industry, is that what the next conversation can look like as well, right? And again, I'm not putting that to a school. In all schools I've worked with, because sometimes if you say to a parent, I'm afraid your child has been bullying this child, some of them will say, oh my God, I'm so horrified. I'm so sorry. Right. Thank you for telling me. There are other people who will say, it's not bullying. It's not bullying. Don't want to talk about. It's just banter. Just having a joke with him, that sort of stuff. And that, even in my career, that's changed in terms of my dad. If I got in trouble at school, and I got in trouble a few times, if I got in trouble at school, my dad would never have taken my side over the school side. He would have said, that's your punishment, do it. And that's a really interesting thing. You know, when you work in education today, and I guess if any parents listening, I would say, obviously protect your child, but trust teachers to make the right decisions for your child as much as possible. Obviously, if something's not good enough, you need to raise it in the right way. But I'm quite amazed by what's changed over my career, how parents are much more likely to say, I don't agree with that punishment. That's not fair. Or I think that's a really interesting shift in society as a whole.
Parents want to take their kids on holiday when they're young, under the age of 13 or 14. The price of flights around school holidays doubles, trebles in some cases. It's outrageous. There's now no break in spring at the beginning or before spring and half term earlier on in the year like there was before. As a dad, so please be a dad right now to answer this question. What do you make of that?
Well, so I guess I'm a dad that works in education, so I'm always stuck to turn.
Come on.
So, look, I can understand that. You have to have lines that you protect, otherwise it would be all shot, right? If you believe that children, because again, what is the future of education? And this horrifies me. People say things like, in the future of education, we won't need teachers anymore, right? We won't need schools anymore. Actually, AI will be so good that a student could learn from their device at home. That horrifies me, right? Not because I'm scared for my industry, although I am scared for my industry if that were the case. It horrifies me because I genuinely believe schools are places where magical, wonderful things happen. I think there's a good in that. And so my answer as a dad, actually, and as a professional, is you have to hold certain lines. If you let that go and you're always never having a full class and that sort of stuff, it's a negative thing.
Hell, but hold on a minute. You just talked about childhood.
Yeah,
you just talked about all these.
You're talking about getting cheap holiday flights.
You're talking about after-school activities, playing rugby, all this kind of stuff. They lose some of their childhood. Does not going on a sneaky holiday with mum and dad?
I think so. There are special circumstances that go on there. But,
sneaky,
yeah,
they've got
You probably shouldn't have called it a sneaky holiday.
Yeah.
So special circumstances for real incredible experiences are a different thing to you want to get a cheaper flight to Benidorm or whatever.
Well, come on, DC kids aren't going to Benidorm, are they?
Benidorm, yeah.
They're probably going to space.
Yeah.
But to me, it's like, well, why do we make in the UK? It's a big deal. Why do we make a big deal? And I understand. Okay, you can't just have anarchy. Of course, I understand that. But you go to work every day and you get so many sick days. Okay, you're allowed whatever it is. I don't want to say 11, 7, whatever it is per year sick days. Okay, you're not feeling up to it. You're not in the mood, whatever it may be. Okay, at school, I guarantee you there'll be people that have their kids in your school that aren't flush with cash. Okay, that are spending all their money on education. Okay, and they're finding it hard to make ends meet. So paying double bubble for flights and hotels just because it's holidays is really challenging for them.
True, but you got to hold lines at various things. Hey, I'll give you an example which is attached to this. Okay, so we have some issues in Dubai College, and actually not just Dubai College, in pretty much every day school in the world, which is where you put, for example, PE. Okay, will mean that sometimes in every year group you'll have a very small percentage who won't be in that lesson. Okay, so if you put PE, period 1, all right, or period 7 or 6, whatever the end of your day is, there's some parents who will say, I am making a value judgment about the best thing for my child. I don't think PE. Now, there's a different side, right?
Mm.
So they'll say, actually, I'd rather do maths or they do their piano than do PE and that sort of stuff. So my child will come in late because they don't want to do that, right? My argument to that person is that I think that sport and physical development is one of the most important things you can do for a young person and an adult. I think it's one of the most proven things in terms of mental health and well-being. And I think that those that play sports and are involved in sports become better people, better team workers, etc., right? So that's the line we hold. And I'm afraid the sad thing about the world is, regardless of your flight price, is if you don't hold those lines, it does lead to anarchy. I can promise you it leads. I'll give you an example, actually. I can give you a more tangible example of why this is true. COVID. Okay. So I was working in a boarding school in COVID, which was incredibly challenging, right? For a whole range of reasons. And what happened was that the hard line was always when you can take your child, right? So the term would end and you could collect your child from boarding school. And that was the hardest of lines. The hardest of lines, right? And nobody ever broke that line. One kid in the whole school would leave before 12 o'clock on the Friday. It was, and what that meant is you had people together right into the end. And we always did the big assembly at the end and big celebration. And you've done a great term. It's a beautiful thing. And the parents obviously were there to collect. It's lovely. COVID just threw all of that up, right? Because people said, well, hold on, because of the flight situation, because of the travel, because of this, because I've got to do this test. And that got encroached upon, that we had to move the assemblies in that school from the Friday afternoon, which we always did, to the Wednesday afternoon, because we couldn't guarantee we would have kids. And it took years to get that percentage back up and back up. So I'm afraid I will be traditional in that sense. I would protect the line. I protect the fact that educational time is good, and it is also better when everybody is together.
Do you think schools are corrupt?
Schools are corrupt.
Yeah.
In what regard?
Well, I know, as many people do, that you can jump the queue. You can jump the waiting list if you know the right person or you cross the right palm with silver. So to me, that's corrupt. That's not ethical. To me, if there's a list and there's 100 people on the list and I was the first one on the list and you were the second one on the list, then we're the next ones that are available.
So two things here. So are schools corrupt? Is my school corrupt? It's two separate questions, right? So my school is one of the hardest schools to get into in Dubai. And for that reason, we are very proud that we have a merit-based entry, okay? Now, we used to have a system, and he can get an exclusive, because I haven't announced this to parents yet, which was called a debentures program, right? Whereby you, as you say, you put some money towards the school, which essentially was a long-term loan, which is beneficial for the school because it helps with cash flow. And of course, when it gets paid back with no interest at a later date, once you get inflation, it's a reduced amount for the school, right? So it helps with immediate cash flow. And many schools operate a debenture scheme. I came in, I said, that's done. That is done. Well, if you can't have a merit-based admission system and have a debenture system, that doesn't make sense to me. It's either merit-based or not. So I removed the debenture system from Dubai College. So this year is the last year that we're going to have it. The board have agreed. Next year, we will have zero debenture system.
And who does that upset?
It upsets those that I guess are so worried about getting their child in that they think that is buying their way. And one of the reasons we moved the debenture system is two reasons. One, I felt it was unfair. And two, because also it led to so many more conversations because people thought, so the debenture system was if your child got in on merit and then they all got in on merit, your child got to the top of the waiting list of merit, okay? But again, that's not fair to me. That's not a fair situation. They have to get in on merit. So yeah, it would be disappointing for people who have the financial ability to pay for the debenture.
So if we're paddle tennis mates and we play golf once every couple of weeks and, our wives are friends and our kids play together, you're my mate, Thomas, we've known each other for a few years. I was in Switzerland with you and come on, mate, you could do me a favor. Do
you know what? This I can hand on heart say is quite an amazing situation because my children are not guaranteed to get into my college. And staff members, you don't guarantee to get in. We don't
imagine your dad as your headmaster. I mean,
I know,
for goodness sake,
they
don't want to go to your college.
Which really, this one really saddens me. But so committed are we to a merit-based entry that we don't have a sibling policy, which hurts me. It hurts me dividing families. But again, the fairest thing to do is to say these children earned their way in, therefore they should get in. Right, but it hurts me to separate families when that happens. And some of the, we released our places a couple of weeks ago. Some of the conversations we've been having the last couple of weeks are with families and siblings saying, "I'm really, really sorry." So the honest answer is, we have again, and this is different. So I don't know, and I wouldn't want to comment on behalf of other schools, but we have a very, very strict process, which means that actually I'm afraid there'll be a check and balance to stop me doing that. So if your kid wanted to get in and we're golf buddies that go way back, I actually don't think I could do it. So much so, we have board members of ours that didn't get their children into my college.
I like to hear that.
Yeah.
That's
But I
good.
can't speak for other schools.
No, I like to hear that. That's good. And just a couple of last questions before we finish. When we talk about different nationalities, how important it is, we spoke about it off camera earlier, but kind of India, Pakistan, Iran, and there's some countries out there where it's literally critical that they go to the right school. It's critical. And there are other nationalities out there where they may be a little bit more relaxed and not so concerned by that. Where I'm from, maybe in the UK and maybe some other countries, and I don't know what they are, but you'd know better than I do. Looking at that, does that mean then that the demographics of your school slowly changes? Because at the end of the day, with the merit-based system, we know that the Chinese and Indian kids study harder because mum and dad are like. So does that change the demographics of the school? Or I mean, you've only been there a year, but have you looked at it at all?
Yeah, we actually have looked at it relatively recently. So because we were interested in our demographic in relation to Dubai, and our demographic is almost exactly the same as the demographic we can find for the spread in Dubai. So what you are correct about is our Chinese students have grown as Chinese have grown in Dubai as well, but they haven't grown beyond that point as well. Look, I guess what you're correct about is that if parents choose to put more effort into their child's education, their ability to access our school, then they might get more of a chance to get into that school. That's fine because we're merit-based, we don't have quotas. For example, my previous school had just a rule that it didn't have any beyond 10% of a certain nationality at any one time. Okay, we don't have that rule, but I mean, again, on the ground, it's an incredibly diverse place. I would say as well is, a really fascinating point here is third culture kids and multicultural kids as well, right? So there are so few kids that are of a single culture in our school. If you ask a kid where you're from, I say, yeah, my dad's Iranian, but my mum actually she's Indian, and they met actually when they were working in Amsterdam and that sort of stuff. So that is a very Dubai is a melting pot. And it's a particular melting pot of people who are international in mindset. So it's not as simple to say that sort of thing. Obviously, some come from more constrained and linear cultures as well. I went to the local primary school because it was around the corner. There was never a conversation about a league table. There it was. It was the closest place to go to.
You walked home, yeah.
Yeah, so you walked home. So it's a different way that people choose schools. But no, our demographic is actually very representative of Dubai at present.
Interesting. There are some new schools that are popping up in recent times. There's been the I forget the name of it, but there was the fees were outrageous. It came out recently. What's the name of the school?
SRI,
which stands for
School of Research and Innovation.
School of Research and Innovation, where the school fees are how much?
I believe they're around 200,000 dirhams.
200,000 dirhams.
Yeah, but again, it's not my school, so
No.
I can't speak to that.
It's all right.
There or thereabouts.
You know what? We're going to edit that bit out and say that you said that. We'll say that I'm joking. But around 200,000 dirhams. And how much does that compare to the fees in your school?
So we're about 100,000 dirhams.
So that's double.
Yeah. And again, if I can do a bit of a sales pitch here, 100,000 dirhams, of course, is about £20,000. And our results, if you put them in the UK for GCSEs, would have been second for co-ed independent schools in the whole of the UK. And it would have been fourth for A-levels if you compared them. And I can tell you that 20 grand for an independent school in the UK, you wouldn't get anywhere near our school.
That's a really important part.
Yeah.
So second and fourth, compared to all of the independent schools in the UK.
Co-ed independent schools using the Times list. So again, just to be really, really clear here, there's a load of caveats there. So if they're single sex, there's some excellent schools. That's not grammar schools, that's independent schools. And third caveat is as well, this is based on the information that the Times has for that list. But yes, when we looked at the list that they had and compared our results with them and then took out the single sex schools, we were second for GCSEs and fourth for A-levels from our evaluation.
I was paying 15 years ago more than that per child at my kids' school in the UK. So that now sounds like it's
value for money.
Very, very good value for money.
And again, we have this conversation quite a lot. The other thing I would say about value for money, which I have to explain this to parents probably every other day, I would say, right? Because again, I'm not going to pass comment on any negatives for for-profit education, okay? But I've spent my whole career based in not-for-profit education. But here's how for-profit education works. You pay your school fee, and 80% of that goes into the school on average. If it's one of these brand schools, for example, one of the ones that are arriving from the UK, about 4% or so will go to them just to pay for the name. And the other 16% will go to the investors that allow that school to be set up, okay? If you put your money into Dubai College, 100% of that goes back into Dubai College. Every dirham goes into the quality of education. We don't pay anyone. We give no dividends. No one takes any money. We pay them obviously a wage, but because it's not for profit, my board do not get any money whatsoever to be part of my board. And I explain that all the time. So I would say it's not just 100,000 in the fees. It's also 100,000 in the delivery and the quality as well.
Homeschooling.
Mm.
That's been something that's been on the rise over recent years. I find that a bit weird because that sounds like COVID schooling.
Mm.
Kind of like why would somebody want to school their kids at home? I believe school is for interaction and community and to compete and stuff like that. So is homeschooling a thing?
Yeah.
And is it and can it be good?
I don't think so. Do you know, of all the questions you've asked, this is the one I will find the hardest to ask because I just don't understand this. I can understand the products that have led to this. Again, COVID, online, people's fears about all sorts of things. Who knows, traffic. Yes, you are correct. Apparently, homeschooling is hugely on the rise. On a personal level, I've just come from sports day, right? I came from my kids' sports day. So I went to my school sports day, and I happened to come on the way here to my children's sports day. It's beautiful, and I can't conceptualize why anyone would not want to give their children that sort of opportunity. So I've got no insight on this, I'm afraid.
So as far as I'm concerned, there's 2 points related to homeschooling that I notice. The whole woke left LGBTQ nonsense that existed, forcing kids down a certain path, which was big news across the Western world over the course of the last few years, now dying away, which we never got exposed to here in the UAE. And then the fear that the education system was falling apart. And so that's clearly why I think people went.
Do you know anyone who homeschools their kids? I don't personally. So
there's a couple here that I know that educate their kids at home. My friend Grant and Elena in Miami, they've homeschooled their kids with tutors at home, and I know they're great kids. Don't get me wrong, they're lovely girls. They really are. But I look at it and I just think it's so sad. Who are you growing up with? Who are your buddies going to be? Where are your memories going to be created from? And all that kind of stuff. And you have different tutors coming in and out of the house during the day. And that doesn't seem fun.
No, but then again, this is the whole point about an experiential education. For example, like school trips, right? School trips are great. Yeah. They're great, right? Overnight school trips. The first time you go on
geography field trips down in Swanage.
Yeah. I went to Slapton actually, but
that
is such an exciting experience, and also for a child, sometimes it's the first time they've been away from home. Such a valuable experience as well. So no, I'm afraid I have zero insight or conception of why anyone would do that.
What do we need to know, about your school that we don't know already that makes it better?
Well, so I'm glad you asked that question. So this is, again, another one of the things I spend a lot of time talking to parents about. What you need to know about us is that we are focused on human development and growth, and it's an incredibly kind place to be. What hurts my feelings when I'm out in Dubai is that people say, "Oh, you're just the academic school." Now, we are the academic school in outcome, and we do very well. But actually, if you feel it on the ground, it's a magical, magical place. It's beautiful. I'd love to show you around, right? It's a very weird vibe because it was set up so many years ago. It's a very campusy feel. We've got lots of trees. People walk around. We're not all boxed into one thing. We go in between the buildings when we go to lessons. People say hello to each other. We prioritize things like that. And again, whether that be sports, whether it be creative arts, and whether it be a philanthropic drive, where our school, Dubai College, opens other schools. So each year we raise money to open a school in Nepal, and we've done 5 of those now. All right. I'm absolutely committed. So I want to set the kids, another little exclusive for you, should anyone be listening. I want to set every child at Dubai College a challenge next year. I'm already trying to do this, which is linked to what you said earlier, to do some form of service and record it next year, right? That's what I'm going to stand up and say at the start of the next year. So it is a magical place, and what hurts our feelings is when people say, "Oh, it's just an academic hothouse," and they're just all head down and they're working towards results. We get great results, great outcomes, but that is not what it feels like on the ground.
Mr. Duckling, thank you for coming to join us
you for having
on the
me.
show today. It's been great getting insights from you. Clearly a very successful education institution that was created here in Dubai, a very made in Dubai product,
Absolutely.
and a young man in charge of it with loads of energy and so much wisdom. Thank you so much for having him.
Thank you very much for having me.